AUDIOACUHO. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to AUDIOACUHO, the podcast where we connect housing professionals within OACUHO and throughout Canada to discuss the topics that are important to the members, by the members, for the members. I'm Jay Copeland, Residence Life Coordinator, Humber College.
And I'm Ryan Doherty, Residence Life Facilitator, Ryerson University.
And we will be your OACUHOsts for the show. Today we'll be speaking with Brian Ingoldsby, Residence Program Coordinator from the University of Guelph, to discuss the ever-important topic of mental health.
Brian recently contacted us with the desire to discuss a few key aspects of mental health in relation to our positions within housing as we look to begin a very unique year in student life and housing. We're wanting to look at some of the challenges. Brian's going to share some of his story and what he sort of learned from that. And then we'll talk about some new initiatives that we're working both with ourselves, with professional staff, and with our student staff to help address this topic. So Brian, welcome to the show. Where should we begin?
Well, thank you very much for having me both. I should have caught this in the pre-show. I did switch roles, so I'm not the residence program coordinator.
Pulling a fast one on us.
But I am an area coordinator there. So previously in the RPC role, I oversaw our residence enrichment program at the university, or in student housing, and now I oversee a team of the managers this year who will be working on our Griffin's Nest program, our online program supporting all of our incoming students. So a little switch up there.
Well, thank you for letting us know. And congratulations on your new role.
Thanks, Jay. So yeah, I thanks again for having me on. I'm excited to be able to chat with you about mental health today. In particular, we had talked about a few different topics that we could talk about, but I was interested in mental health. As Ryan mentioned, I'm going to share a little bit about my personal story, and I think there's a lot of power in people sharing their stories and other people being able to hear those stories and knowing that they're not alone, that there's others that might be going through similar things to what they're going through. If there's people who maybe in an earlier stage of mental health struggles where they are having a harder time right now, or harder than it has been. It's also nice to hear a message that you can persevere and that you can learn, and with learning and treatment, and you can really get back to a place where you can thrive and have a pretty amazing life. And so, yeah, I just wanted to I'll share a bit about my own story, and then also some stuff about our field and some things that we're doing both for professional staff and student staff and try to do our part to help build our capacity and a culture of a little bit more acceptance, one step at a time.
All right. Well, that sounds perfect. And honestly, I think there's a lot of value in the story that you're about to share. And perhaps Ryan and I will have some things to contribute ourselves based on our own experiences. But by all means, let us know how it's gone for you.
All right. Well, thanks. So for me personally, my mental health journey really started about 5 years ago. The first time I was really aware of that I had a mental health journey was probably when it started about 5 years ago, where it was the week after Thanksgiving, October 2015, and there's a particular memory that is ingrained in my head. And it was a Thursday. I had struggled to sleep all week, and I just remember being in the car with my wife, just breaking down for the first time. I probably hadn't cried in 10 years, and we were sitting there behind Lanark Hall at the U of G, and I was terrified that my life as I knew it was over, that I would need to quit my job, and I wouldn't be able to take care of myself and my wife, that all these dreams and hopes that I had were kind of gone. And that was kind of the breaking, or that was kind of where it really started with a bang for me, where for a long time leading up to that point, I feel like I had been super high functioning. I was put a lot of effort into my work, um, put a lot of effort into. I was doing my master's at the time. Um, had always looking to take on new opportunities at work and more responsibility, and really trying to always push myself to be the best at everything, do the best at everything. And then all of a sudden, I think something like clicked in my body where it was my body's way of saying like, no, you've been doing this too much. You've been pushing yourself too hard. Like you're not taking the other signs or to slow down and calm down. And so like we need to step in and do something here. Um, so yeah, it was a really acute um, experience of generalized anxiety that um, that came on really fast, and that I've been working through for a number of years since then.
And is it still something that you find you're actively dealing with today, kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure. So um, it's definitely been a journey. I think the the months afterwards um, were particularly rough, where I'd often call my wife like 10 plus times a day, or I'd call my mom or my dad, who were kind of part of my support group, countless times where I just couldn't calm down, like where I'd be firing with such anxiety that it got overwhelming, and so um, that was kind of the experience for a while, where once in a while I could get distracted enough by work or by something to pull myself out of my racing mind, and I'd kind of get the odd glimmer of my old life, and it would be this joyous experience where it was like, oh my goodness, like this is what it feels like not to be in that place. Um, but then with time, and I think over the course of that year, and then in the subsequent years since, a lot of things have helped a lot. So therapy and medication, and then a number of things that I do to try to support my well-being and my health. It gradually got a lot easier. So the first year was quite a roller coaster, um, but everything did tend to move in the right direction. With there was probably more ups than downs, and while at times it certainly didn't feel like that, I feel like I've been trending in the right direction for the last 5 years. So yeah, like it's still, I guess, back to the question about today and my life today. Um, there are still times where um, it does, I do kind of get a little bit overwhelmed, or where I think about my anxiety most days, but most days it doesn't impact my behavior or really my quality of life. Um, it's usually when it's kind of been at a heightened state for a few days in a row that sometimes I can get kind of overcome with frustration or worry about it. Um, but then, yeah, I'm much more had a lot of practice at dealing with those situations now, and so I think I've got some great supports and stuff in place when that does happen. And also and this is a big part too, I think, when once you get a bit of hindsight, knowing that you do get through those tougher periods and that you come back out on top, and you have prolonged periods of success, where when it first started and it was all unknown, there was more of a worry that I would never get back to those places, where now logically you kind of know that you will get back to that place, and it can make the everything a little bit easier. So there's less fear and desperation in those times.
I do think it's interesting. And Ryan, I don't know if you've had sort of similar experiences in any way in terms of like mental health, but like I do think that this is something like a lot of people that we know that are in this field and industry likely go through, but you don't hear about it a lot. Uh, any
It's
thoughts on that?
yeah. I've actually, as I'm listening to Brian speak, I'm connecting with a lot of what he says in
Yeah.
terms of these rushes of these overwhelming feelings. Some day, at least for me, the way it experiences, some days it's just a little bit of chest tightness, and other days I'm like, oh, I'm not good. I know I'm irritable with my partner. Anytime I try and communicate anything that has emotion, there's like it's not regulated, and there's maybe tears connected to it or whatever for me. And I think about a lot of different things, and for me, I immediately thought of two things. One, our role in often residence life as being the caretaker, the supporter,
Mhm.
that support network for someone else, and the discomfort in seeking support and saying, even when it's at that lower level before it escalates into maybe a panic attack or something like that,
Mhm.
saying, I'm not feeling well, I'm feeling off, something upset me, whatever that is. And the other part that I've been thinking a lot about is at least my identity as a man and how that informs or maybe misinforms the way in which I communicate about my emotions, my feelings, and all of that. Um, and
Well, I
it's
think
something
the
that I'm
thing,
really, really trying to figure out as how do I express my feelings
yeah.
with this like false conditioning of, I'm using air quotes, it's obviously impossible to see, about what it means to be a man and how we talk about our feelings.
Well, I also think there's a thing that we can agree with where it's like what it means to be like a residence life staff professional or, a residence housing, whatever professional who deals with other people and like the expectation around us to like be at 100% so that we can give our 100% to the students, to the staff that we oversee, because we're constantly dealing with these kind of higher level mental health issues from other people, but they begin to wear on you. And there's this, I know at least for me, there's a like a present and back of mind kind of fear, like, what if somebody discovers that like I'm not at 100% right now and they're concerned that I can't effectively do my job? And even worse, when you get to the point where you're like, I'm not at 100% and I may need to call for help, and I hope nobody thinks less of me for having to reach out when I'm supposed to be the person you go to.
Yeah,
And I don't know if either of the
yeah,
two of you have experienced anything like that, but that's something that I deal with, especially now, given the current times when it's just you're dealing with your own isolation and health and anxieties around things. But
Jay, it's it's interesting you're using this expression 100% because I had a conversation with a past colleague, Anne Lay of mine, around when she was not feeling 100%. She was very good at communicating that. And my
Mhm.
response was always like, absolutely, totally fine. Whatever you can bring to work, and we were colleagues, is awesome. I'm happy to have whatever someone can bring. But I always felt that whatever she or whoever my colleague was couldn't bring, I had to bring that. And Anne kind of sat me
Mhm.
down and had a conversation with me of, this is not going to turn out well for you.
Yeah.
I think that's totally true, Ryan. With where we can be so caring for other people, and so you know how you're supposed to treat others, and you know how you're supposed to treat yourself. But and part of it, I think, might be some of that conditioning around masculinity and stuff as well. Um, but yeah, it's not okay to for me to ever not perform at my best, or it felt like it wasn't okay for me to ever do that,
Hmm.
even though I would tell somebody else like those messages of support and treat others so well. Um, but for myself, it was always that constant pressure of like pushing myself to do better and to do the next thing and to achieve and be the best, and this unhealthy sense of competition against like this abstract person you're never going to catch up with, or and I think part of that, especially I think in our roles where there's always an opportunity to do more and to be able to support people further, and um, it's a tough place to be in where you can spend as many hours as possible in the job and still have more stuff you can do. Um, and so I think that initially it's like, yeah, I can definitely thrive in an environment like that, but over time, um, that certainly I think took its toll.
Hmm. Brian, it brings me back to one of the original things that you had said where, you'd been working and then and you were constantly striving to perform at like a high level and taking on new challenges, and, you know, uh then all of a sudden this anxiety like overtook you, and you just had like that moment of breakdown kind of thing. Like I find that resonates with my experience very much. And I don't know how many people know this within the overall like organization kind of thing, but the my job used to be that I was a train conductor and I drove GO trains. And
Hey,
the
I didn't know that.
transition from that back into residence life, which in my mind was like a more meaningful job where I could give back to people and like do something meaningful with my life, was a very significant mental health breakdown, which caused me to have to like reevaluate my entire life, living situation, career, like everything. So it was very significant. But now, like one of the takeaways, and the reason that I brought that up is I used to be one of those people who's like, I'm not bringing my 100%. And after I said it earlier, and when Ryan had brought it up, I was like, oh, I said 100% again. And I think we have to get ourselves out of that mindset where you need to be at your 100%. I think the expectation should be like 75 and above, or whatever we want to put a reasonable grade in university, college,
What do they
kind of
say?
like.
C's get degrees?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that should be expectation with mental health, both your own and the people that you're working with around you, so that you're not setting expectations too high for everyone and not constantly trying to overachieve at the cost of your own like health and wellness, because that trickles down to the people that you're overseeing, to the students within your building, to the people that you work with that are around you.
Totally. I think this is a little bit of an aside, but I think it's a good jumping off on that 75%. Um, Brene Brown, I don't know if you've been listening to her new podcast this year. So,
She's doing
um,
great work.
yeah, she's podcasting all the time. But she's got this thing with her husband where together, when they come into a room or they're getting back from, she's been on a trip speaking. He's a doctor, so he's getting back from work. Um, they tell each other what percent they're at, and combined, they have to come up to figure out a way to get to 100% to deal with their kids, to deal with life, to um,
That's
and
very
so
good.
they'll come in and she'll say like, if she's at 40% and he'll be like, oh no, I'm at 30%. It's like then you have to figure out, let's okay, like how do we pick each other up? How as a team do we support each other through that? And I think that can transfer over pretty well too, to if you really have that a close knit team that you work with. There's that, you do have that support there where people come with what they have, and together you pick each other up, and as a team are able to accomplish those things. But where yourself, if you're only relying on yourself, you're not able to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
no. Go ahead. I was just gonna. Well, sure. I'll go ahead. I was gonna ask Brian. You shared a lot with your experiences, and now, as you mentioned at the start of the episode, you're in a new role and you're supporting professional staff. In what way did your experiences inform how you supervise and support your professional staff?
Yeah, in so many ways. Um, it definitely it definitely taught me humility, um, in a way that I had never experienced before. Um, I think I probably was could be hard to work with when I was a new professional. I had super high expectations of myself and of everybody, um, and I couldn't understand why people didn't meet those expectations. And it sounds like a real treat, right? Uh, but yeah, I had, and I think it took for me. It took being knocked down to a place where I'd never been before to realize that people are going through things and you don't know what people are going through, and um, you need to be aware of that. And I think that's helped me a lot to um, hopefully be be a better support for the people that I do work with, and help, I think, form a lot of what um, the culture I try to support and try to help grow, um, being directed by that idea that it's everybody's in a different place, everybody's dealing with something different. We want you to be able to bring your whole self to work. We want you to be able to feel safe at work. Um, Psychological safety, I've been doing some reading on lately, and um, it's super important for your well-being, and it's a foundational like human need to feel safe. So there's a significant well-being impact, but then there's also, it's a the greatest predictor of team success, is Google looked at their teams, and there's a number of factors, but by far, psychological safety came out on top as the predictor of team success. And so
Good
that's
takeaway.
something that I've tried to bring to my role quite a bit too, where doing what I can to help create environments where um, the team, everybody does feel safe, everybody feels safe to share, um, where fallibility is acknowledged and curiosity is modeled, and everybody has a voice. And I think by creating that type of environment, you can do a lot for your team's performance, but then also to really support the well being of the staff that you're with. Um,
Yeah.
so that's a piece of it, I think. And then there's also just a lot of it is, I think, a lot of basic things that a lot of people in the field would already be doing. But like we do a lot of intentional PD um, to try to build trust and to try to build comfort within a team. Um, we try to place an intentional focus on well-being and one-on-ones, and being open. I think we talked about a little bit about the field, and while we're certainly very open about mental health, I think I try to be open with the people that I work with too about past struggles, and I think by showing that vulnerability myself, I think it gives opportunity for others to share that as well. um, and so yeah, if we can model that comfort with talking about our well-being, and or when we're not doing well, being able to talk about that, I think that's helped, um, or hopefully that's helpful for some of the staff that I work with as well.
Yeah. You mentioned, and I think this is kind of one thing that I was interested in. Really, is you had mentioned sort of some new initiatives that you were going over with staff, and I know that I think this is probably, or at least it should be, a concern of pretty much everyone in a management role with staff right now. Because I'm thinking for the new year, dealing with my own isolation, being a live-in staff member and having very limited social networks that I can participate in at this point in time,
Mhm.
uh, with reduced staff numbers and having staff come into buildings where social distancing is being I don't want to say enforced, but it's being sort of like written into rules and things like that, and strongly encouraged, and as like the expected leaders of their peers and things that have to demonstrate what like good interactions within residents have to be like. I'm anticipating that like our staff are going to be more isolated than the average student even, and trying to think about ways to support them when they don't have a larger social network that they get to interact with and participate in. And if there's guest restrictions and things like that in place as well at your institution, that adds another layer of isolation where like they might not have transportation to go home kind of thing and visit their families, and it might really
Mhm.
just be them. So what
Mhm.
do we need to be doing, and what are some ideas that we can like put forward to potentially help staff in dealing with these sort of feelings of isolation and like the mental health issues that might arise as a result of it, or just in general?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was one program that we're going to be piloting with our on-campus staff this year. So similar to a lot of institutions, uh, we've significantly scaled back the number of students that we have in residence and the number of staff we'll have this year. But in some ways, that allows us to do a little bit more um, piloting of some newer projects with a bit of a
Yeah.
decreased scope. So one project in particular that I'm pretty excited for us to try out is um, actually implementing behavior change plans with our student staff, focused on some aspect of their behavior related to their well-being. So whether that be their exercise, nutrition, sleep, it could be study and work habits, or their emotional or mental health, or
Mhm.
some aspect of their well-being. And it'll be starting in their training program. We've For the last number of years, we've always done sessions on staff well-being, and tried to introduce the necessity for self-care, in particular because of the nature of the roles that they're in. There's a huge body of research supporting the impact on RAs of the RA job, in
Mhm.
terms of burnout and secondary trauma, and some of those things. And
Yeah.
so trying to get that out there to start, and so that they and emphasize the importance of, we're going to talk about self-care now, and you may be doing great now, but it's important to consider this messaging. So this year, on in addition to doing that, we're going to look to build in some more regular touch points with our staff throughout the year. So they'll start working towards their first behavior change plan in their training session, and then they'll have a couple weeks to kind of track their behavior with respect to the particular behavior that they're going to be looking to change, and then they're going to meet with their manager during their first one-on-one, and work together to talk about that behavior, what they're tracking for the first couple weeks look like, and then set goals, and come up with a practical and achievable plan to work towards those goals for the next 6-week period.
That's very cool.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, so we're hopeful that staff will self-monitor, and RMs will be able to check in during one-on-ones, and we'll try it for the first 6 weeks with them keeping kind of a journal of their progress, and then there'll be the opportunity through the course of Monday night meeting, or what we call Monday night meetings. Is that on field wide?
I think
the staff meeting.
Yeah, we might change the night, but they happen.
Yeah.
So after the first 6 weeks too, there'll be an opportunity for a larger discussion there around kind of reviewing some of the areas of well-being and reviewing some of the research that they would have originally been introduced to during training, and then beginning that process again for the second 6-week period of the fall, and then seeing if that can have a positive impact on them feeling that they're living a healthier life and being satisfied with it. So and I think part of it was trying to have that regular touch point where we're intentionally talking about the topic more regularly, beyond just working to support staff once they've reached a point of where they're more so in distress. So that's one thing that I'm pretty excited about for us to be trying out this year, and we'll certainly share more of it as it goes on, if how it's going.
I'm excited to hear about this at the OACUHO Spring Conference 2021, if the world will allow such a thing to happen.
Hopefully there'll be an online portion or something.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying there'll be such a backlog of presentations by then. All the new stuff.
All the brilliant ideas. Here at Ryerson, we have something called the Wellness One program, and I think there's a lot of different pillars to it. But for me, when I came to Ryerson, the thing that I thought was the most incredible about the program is that we are actually equipping our student staff to talk about their wellness needs, and that was a big focus around it. So we talk about wellness in terms of 4 pillars: financial, work, academic, and personal. And then we give them being our student staff, some language to actually talk about where they're at in terms of their wellness there, which has helped them to advocate for their wellness in a proactive way, but also giving them the space to talk about their wellness in a reactive way. And honestly, as a manager, I feel like it's helped me manage my student staff better, because I know where they're at, I know what their needs are. We're talking about all of these different pieces, whether they're needing accommodations for paying residence fees. If we're talking about programming, spending money, how are we talking about that in a space where the student doesn't feel like they have to put their own money down and then request reimbursement later if money is so tight that that's not something that they can do? And that's just on the financial side, but we talk about academics and all of that. And it's really helped me to see the whole student. And I think I really hate the term preparing them for, air quotes, real life, but when we prepare our student staff for life after graduation and navigating the professional world after this residence life environment or their student staff job, these are the types of things that will really serve them well as they enter whatever the field is that they do, and as they progress in their careers.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing that we use language like preparing them for real life. Life only starts after you've graduated multiple
It's
levels
once
of
you're like in
Googling.
your mid-20s, that's
Does
life.
that
Oh
mean
yeah,
people who like
that's life,
go to
definitely.
post-secondary never start real life? They're living in the dream world? I don't know. But just being mindful of the time, we are sort of at a point where we're looking to kind of wrap up. But I did want to comment that, like, I think one of the main takeaways from both of your sort of initiatives that you've talked about is that idea of putting mental health at like the forefront so that it's something that is like out there in the open. The students and staff know that, you know, it's a concern that we're willing to make a priority, kind of one scenario. And I think that reduces the stigma around talking about it and helps them, you know, anyone who's on your staff kind of open up to the
Absolutely.
idea that it's okay to have these discussions and it's okay to not be at 100% and you can talk about it, and we're going to be just as supportive to you as we would the students who we oversee and, you know, look out for. We think that's a good takeaway for this episode.
Hey, that sounds great.
All
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I think the more that we can make that a topic that, yeah, like Ryan said, it's talked about more regularly, that we develop a common language around it, is a great place to start. And I think so the more that we can do to bring that front and center, I think the better.
Yeah. Well, Brian, it's been honestly wonderful to have you. I'm sure that with the topic of mental health, we could talk for days
Mhm.
about different ideas,
For a
and three
while.
of us could likely spitball back and forth. But I want to say that's all the time we really have for today. So thank you so much for joining us. Who knows, with the amount of ideas you presented us, we may yet have you back for
Mhm.
another discussion. But yeah, thanks again for coming on the show.
Yes,
Thanks
and
very much for having me.
yeah, and to our listeners, if you want to continue the conversation around this topic, uh, please feel free to reach out to Brian at B Ingolds. That's Bingolds at uoguelph.ca, or you can reach out to myself at ryan.doherty at ryerson.ca or jay at jason.copeland at humber.ca. We would love to have you on the podcast. We're asking people all the time. Reach out if you have ideas. We'd really love to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone who's reached out so far. It's meant a lot to both Ryan and I to have so much interest. So once again, feel free to reach out with any ideas you might have, and have a great day. We'll see you next time.